with all due respect.
Hey, we're Josh Ortegan and Gray Achille, and this is With All Due Respect, the show where we keep it real about health, fitness, and performance. From weight loss to sports development, we're covering the conversations that matter.
Follow us on Instagram at WaterXPod, WADR, and visit PhenomBrand.com, PHNM, for performance gear and training programs built for real results. Let's get into it.
All right, guys, we are With All Due Respect. I don't even know the number this is. 14, 115, 114. Don, 114 of these. And I'll tell you, and I'll pay honor to this, Gray keeps us going. Gray is the master schedule. Don, if you don't know this about Gray, if it is routine, scheduled, and organized, Gray can get it done.
That's why you need a female in your life, I think.
Yeah. I think Gray has schedules. She does all of the social media for the business and the side business. And it's because it is scheduled, put together, organized. We know what's going out, when, where. It is Don, it is unbelievable to be this organized and do the routine and knock out like crazy. So I just want to honor Gray and her ability to keep a week. We have routinely record at least one a week for the last 100. No, probably the last, because we started out every couple of weeks. The last 90 weeks has probably been Gray saying, hey, block this time off your schedule. We got this buddy coming on. We're doing this. Send the link. Boom. And I'm grateful for it. Don, I would like to ask you, are you an organized guy?
I do like structure. I do like
me too.
organization. And my current position is seasonal. So I'm a professor at a small college. And so during the semester, I'm highly structured and very organized with my clinical schedule and my teaching schedule. And then during the off times, like, Christmas break and summer break, I actually really struggle because I don't have someone telling me where to be, what to be, kind of like the post-military person who's trying to re-enter civilian life. I find myself really struggling with, not having to be somewhere at a certain time. And so my productivity, I think, goes way down.
Isn't that interesting? I noticed that, Don, over the 4th of July break. I had all these plans to get all these things done with 1 week off, and I didn't do any of them. And I had the most available time to do that.
So you take this, this conversation and villainize rest. Like, I think in our culture, we have a tendency to think, the person who doesn't take breaks is somehow, more expert or better off. And so I think I've tried to appreciate these downtimes I currently have, and learn how to do that better, learn how to vacation and take time away. Cause I do think it makes me better, when I am, busy and doing my craft. And so I think sometimes we have a tendency to go, there's no value in rest or slow times or holidays. I know that's how I was early in my career.
I'm guilty. Yeah.
And my wife had to teach me how to vacation. I didn't grow up in a vacationing, household.
Me neither.
And in fact, I grew up in a tourist community in South Jersey. And so actually summertime was like our busy time as a family. We got a family business. And so I just never went on vacations growing up. And my wife did. And eventually she was like, we have to go. And so the first few family vacations I went on, they weren't pleasant. Like I had a bunch of little kids, little boys. And I just had a hard time getting my mind right for that. So all that to say that I think probably what our audience needs to hear more is not that rest is bad or downtimes or unstructured time is bad. Play is good. And, it's just finding out how to toggle those gears in and out of, like, this is my, busy productivity time. And then this is time to unplug and decompress and let go of all the, achieving and chasing
Mm.
Mhm.
and growth.
I'll tell you something I've never told anybody in my life. When I was in my early 20s, I didn't grow up in a vacation family either. And still to this day, I struggle to understand, like, why do we got to go somewhere to get away to be somewhere? Like, um, I was, I was watching an interview with Gene Simmons from Kiss,
Mm-hmm.
and he talked about branding the Kiss brand, right? It was a brand. Kiss was a brand.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
They had cartoons. It was a show. And he said when he was a kid, he did the math that if he worked every Saturday for 10 years, how far ahead he could get with somebody and just outwork people by just adding one extra day. And I think I read that, I saw that, I implemented that in my life, and it warped me as a kid.
What do you
Gene
mean
Simmons.
warped? Like,
It warped me because I didn't understand. I thought it was the amount of work, not the quality of work.
mhm.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Which then led me into learning and understanding about things like deep practice, intentional practice, especially with jujitsu. We have a culture that says, "Oh, it's okay just to show up." Sometimes, oh, just
Mhm.
you hear it say, "Keep showing up, keep showing up." Well, man, dude, like I showed up to a lot of jujitsu early on in my career with a waste of an hour and a half.
Yeah.
Right.
My
I,
deep practice wasn't there at all.
I'm sensitive to this word grind.
Me too.
Keep grinding.
Hmm.
Go in the weight room and do the work. No, this is a privilege. It's a privilege to work in this industry. It's a privilege to go
Mhm.
to a gym. I don't think you're grinding really,
Hmm.
like I have a lot of family kin in Appalachia. And so like
Oh, okay.
grinding, right? It was 100 years ago working in a coal mine,
Yeah.
with no, with, no health care and no life insurance and no service, like my, um, my father-in-law's father died in a coal mine, like those,
Wow.
like,
Yeah.
anyway, I think, yeah, I think we're really blessed and privileged. And so, yeah, I think sometimes we, in this blue collar hard work type culture, and I think the weight room, strength and conditioning prides itself on that, especially the profession of strength and conditioning, like sports medicine as well. It's well, how many hours did you put in this week? I've heard horror stories of folks working at high levels, and whoever the head person was, you had to show up before them and you had to stay later than them. When you couldn't leave till they left. Those types of
Mm, that's
habits.
dangerous. That's dangerous.
Yeah, I think it burns people out and it bores them out. And I don't think that they're, necessarily healthy. And so I think it's an important message just for anyone listening that I'm not saying don't work hard. I absolutely believe in hard work, and I've slept in the clinic,
Mhm.
before. So I mean, I've done some extreme things and tried to pursue excellence and be really, really good at what I do. But I think in maybe midlife, I appreciate rhythms of rest more
Mhm.
now than I ever have. And if there's anything that, an early professional that might hear this that I'd like them to hear is that be patient. It's okay to take breaks. In fact, I think it's really
Yeah.
good and healthy to,
Yeah.
go read or study something else. We're talking about expertise today. Like,
Hmm.
how do you become an expert? Well, sure, you have to have a lot of deep work and long obedience in the same direction. But I think you'll actually find catalyst and some real amazing acceleration in your expertise by taking breaks, getting away from it for a little bit, and then coming back to it, and looking at your craft with fresh eyes.
I
I think there's I'm sorry, Aaron, or Gray. I just wanted to say that
you're
I
no,
think there's
you're
a lot
good.
of value in whatever setting you're in and whatever it is you do. There are a lot of biases and blind spots that come with that. Like if you're in a clinical setting, you're working with broken bodies versus a weight room or a field where you're working with healthy bodies. There's a lot of value in going into the other setting, right? Go into the other room. If you're a researcher, don't forget about going into practice settings or vice versa, because there's so much to learn from, the person inside of our industry that's just looking at the problem or the situation or what we do differently. And I think that's been a big catalyst for me in my growth.
Mhm. I implemented a rule for myself a few years ago in the category of rest because I was definitely the person that was like, I'm just going to grind all the time, right? I'm just going to do as much as I can. And I'm still a young professional. I would say I'm only 30, but the rule I implemented a few years ago is for every like chunk of stressful things that I do, I have to have a small chunk of doing something that's non-stressful. So whether that's like light computer work or going for a walk or like just taking time to get back into my parasympathetic, that's been the best thing for my creativity, my workflow, my consistent like calendar than anything, right? So if I work a Saturday morning, I don't touch my phone Sunday. I don't talk to people Sunday. I don't look at my email on Sunday so that I can come back on Monday.
Yeah, great. These are called boundaries,
Yeah, right.
right?
Didn't learn them
Which
till I was like 27 or 28,
yeah,
but yeah.
I think most of us, right? And some of us never learn them. But wow, like so important. So I
Mm,
teach undergrads, right? Most of my students are 18 to 23, and I advise these students, and I'm the person, probably one of the very few in their life that's like, hey, what can you cut out? What can you
mm,
do less? I was treating a volleyball player this morning who's a double major, exercise science and nutrition, and she's playing two versions of volleyball. She's playing indoor and outdoor. Um, and I was like, do you have to do all four of those things? Like, I think being a student athlete is enough work. That's already two jobs. It sounds like you have four jobs. You have two majors and two sports. Who could you become by cutting out, some of that and really
mhm,
focusing on what your gifting is? Like, are you better at indoor or outdoor? Okay, well, do the one that you're better at. And then, do you want to be a movement professional or a food professional? I'm not saying you can't be both, but you're probably only going to get licensed or really highly educated in one of those directions. And so let's pick one. It seems kind of un-American, I think. I think our culture is such that we just
yes.
kind of want it all and we want to say yes to everything, and we want to have all the degrees and all the licenses. But I actually think we need to fast from that. I think that's a gorging, of information. We don't lack information. We don't lack science. We don't lack good information. We lack the discipline to execute or implement
Mm,
what we already know. And I think we're all guilty of that at some degree, whether it's flossing or aerobic exercise or resting. I don't think it's a um, revolutionary thought that rest is important, but to actually implement it and structure it, it's just like meal planning. Yeah, these are big shifts for some people, and a lot of professional cultures are such that the grind is praised, and it's
mhm,
like, oh, well, how many days straight did you work? And um, I just there's a time for that. I'm not saying you'll never do that. I
Mhm,
think there's a time to do it, especially if you start a business or you're
mhm.
early in your career. I'm not against it, but it it you can only do it for so long. It will eventually harm you, and it'll get in the way of you being an expert.
Yeah, the subject we're talking about, and I'm gonna ask you to do this, Don. This is gonna be hard for you. Can you introduce yourself again?
Yeah,
Uh, who you are, what you do, what your history has been, especially as I see this as an academia subject. Is this an academia subject?
it's conceptual.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair.
And the reason I want to bring up this idea of expertise was you mentioned this concept to me, honestly, like a year and a half to 2 years ago of what makes them an expert. And it's kind of sat on my head for a long time. And, we talk about people who work really hard. Lately, we've talked about high performers. We've interviewed a lot of high performers,
mhm,
people who have done absolutely exceptional things. We had an 80-year-old woman who finished the Ironman and
mhm,
triathlon world
mhm,
championships at 80. We interviewed a guy who rang the bell for his last cancer treatment and ran 100 miles home.
mhm,
Wow.
And I'm just like, and we think about this rest, and I think about these other things of, are we really all being all that we can be as people, as performers? Are we really all performing at the highest level we can? What you've kind of identified in the last 5, 10 minutes to me is Well, that doesn't always mean the guy who grinds the hardest,
Mhm.
right? The person who puts in the most hours. We talk a lot about on this podcast doing things that are hard, doing things you're supposed to be doing as a person, responsibilities, and then doing hard things to refine yourself to become a stronger, better person. The pruning concept,
Mhm.
right? The pruning concept to me has not always been a concept to me that I heard, but a concept that I grew up with growing up in a environment where pruning off old dead wood, pruning off old fruit. I mean, it
Mhm.
is biblical, isn't it? John 15,
Mhm.
John 15, pruning, right, right. Pruning off dead fruit so more can grow. Then we talk about here's this grind concept that can grind you down. Now we're going to talk about expertise. What
Mhm.
makes you, I feel like they're all connected, in my opinion. I, do a quick intro, Don, and then let's get into the subject of expertise because we all work in an industry where there's a whole lot of experts.
Mhm.
Or just ask them, right?
Yeah.
Self-proclaimed.
Yep, yep.
Mhm.
Give our people a rundown of Don Reagan.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me. I
Mhm.
guess we kind of skipped that part.
It's okay.
Firstly, um, I started in the fitness, strength and conditioning industry almost really 25 years ago now. Um, my PE teacher in Ocean City, New Jersey, was part owner of Iron Raider Gym and Fitness. It was also called the Islander Gym. And, I wasn't a particularly good athlete, but I really liked training. And so I got a job in that. I begged him for a job in that gym, and I worked the front desk throughout high school, and fell in love with the community, with exercise, with I would call it human performance, but I think I was really attracted to it broadly. And then if you were to ask me to like write an essay for why you should let me into your grad program or or to hire me, I would tell you that I really fell in love with what exercise can do. During my senior year of high school, I purchased for my grandmother, who at the time was probably in her early 80s, when she was a Southern Belle. And for Christmas, I bought her like a 1 month gym membership to not the gym I was going to, but a different gym. It was a kind of a women's and senior citizens gym, and their angle was like very little free weights. They used pneumatic compression. But anyway, it took a few probably weeks, maybe months to like persuade her to do it, but she eventually went, and probably like at like 79, 81, 83, somewhere around there. And then as I was continuing to train and be around more athletic types, I then saw her embrace structured exercise 3 times a week for the first time in her life. I mean, she might have done some walking and so on, but she had never strength trained. And she was very hesitant. And then she went, and I just think the end of her life was really transformed. And I think the quality of her life was improved. And so, as a very young person, as a teenager, I got to see exercise in my own life and in sort of this athletic community that I was a part of. That was actually kind of a hardcore gym. We had the platforms in the back and strongman stuff and Olympic weightlifters, and it was a really cool environment. But then I also got to see it at the other end of life what exercise could do, and there was something about that that just really resonated with me. So, in my essence, I'm a connector. That's really who I am, and then I'm a learner, and then I think also a teacher. And so those things, I think all those things go together. I think to be a good teacher, you have to be good at connecting with your students, with your pupils. I think to be a good teacher, you have to be learning, and so to me, those all mutually influence one another. And then my journey went from an exercise science degree to a clinical doctorate in physical therapy. But my goal was to always be a practitioner first, and then also to be a teacher, in some way. So I've taught at 4 universities. I've been, part time at some of them. I've taught in PT school, PTA school, athletic training schools, exercise science. I've been a teacher in the clinic. So it's kind of sort of finding my path while still being able to provide for my family. I'm a husband of one woman and a father of 4 sons.
Ooh.
And so I'm the primary provider for our family. And so finding ways to do that, kind of along this journey has been kind of the game.
What do you teach? What are your teaching
Yeah.
currently? What are you
So I'm currently teaching, and these are probably really my favorite courses to teach. Every semester I teach biomechanics, which is basically, I like to call it movement math or like a force course. Then I teach a kinesiology class, which is musculoskeletal anatomy, palpation and goniometry. And then my favorite class I teach is motor learning, which is, I think, really where we kind of keep coming back and
Mhm.
finding really common or interesting subject matter, because inside of motor learning is this concept of expertise. And so a researcher named last name Gentile, she you know proposed a continuum that on one end, maybe the left end would be novice, and then on the other end of this kind of really ongoing line, if you will, is the word expertise. And I don't think it's really meant to be that you know, yeah. And this is where I think we misunderstand expertise is we really want to put a metric on it. Like we want to say 10,000 hours and
Mhm.
you're an expert, because
Mhm.
Eric Erickson did some work in this
Mhm.
area, and
Mhm.
then Malcolm Gladwell made it
Mhm.
popular and said, oh, you just need to do 10,000 hours and you'll be an expert. Well,
Mhm.
I mean, quantity does matter. And I'm not saying 10,000 hours isn't a bad rule. I think it's good, but the quality of that work really matters. And so I have been fascinated as a PT, as a professor, someone fascinated with human performance in all of its aspects, not just physical, but cognitive, personal, any really, expertise or excellence, um, is how do we get there? And I think there's lots of ways that we misunderstand and misinterpret expertise. And you can see this really, to me, it's really interesting to like go on somebody's website, any social media influencer, anybody, private practitioner, and read their biography,
Mm.
right? When they say, "Hi, my name is Josh Ortegan," like, this is who I am. Well, they're going to show you very quickly what they value. Most people put the years of experience. I've been doing this for 25 years.
Mhm.
And it's okay. Well, have all 25 years been in the same place? Are you a private practitioner who owns your own business and you're alone? Because I'll tell you that I think it's hard to become an expert in an echo chamber where you're the only person there, or you're the smartest, in your space, or you're not inviting people into your space to challenge you. There's other people who maybe, highly value their certifications and their credentials, right? So they're going to show you this
Mhm.
laundry list of all the qualifications that they have. I'm not saying any of that's bad. Probably the most common in our industry is how fit are they, right? Just,
Mhm.
take pictures of yourself with, very, little clothes on, and we will, determine how good your programming works, or, how good you are at exercise prescription. I think that's probably one of, I mean, this just happens to be that I'm not that physically gifted. So it's probably pretty easy for me to criticize that one. But I think that, I've seen that play out so much, the former D1 athlete who then pivots into personal
Mhm.
training. What
Yeah.
makes them qualified to be a personal trainer or a strength coach? That they performed at a high level, that they're very fit. And I think that is a form of expertise, but it's, I think, a very different business going from being an elite athlete or being very, very fit and then helping other people
Mhm.
to rehab or be fit or make lifestyle change. They're very, very different.
I think this is
And
a
I think
struggle we see a lot.
we conflate them a lot. And I think
Mhm.
that we know this in sport, the superstar athletes who try to coach, generally, it doesn't go particularly well. I think they tend to struggle to coach other people who don't have that exceptional quality or multiple qualities to be superstar athletes. All these are different. These are all examples of different pathways to expertise, and none of them are bad. And I'm not saying that one is right versus one is wrong. I think they're all different ways. Um, People will value, you know, some path over the
Mhm.
others. I think we tend to value the practitioner path. How many years have you been practicing this discipline? How what have been your kind of firsthand accomplishments? If you've played in the NBA, then of course you'd be a really good basketball coach.
Hmm.
And I would challenge that may not be the case, and you may not want to hire that person who played the sport at a high level to be your high school coach or your kids coach just because they played at a high level. I think there are multiple ways to get there, and probably a combination, a consortium of multiple aspects is probably best. Like I think if you're going to be an exercise professional, I think your people need to see you sweat. Like you do need to
Hmm.
practice, what you preach. So this isn't. I'm not trying to be an academician here and say that you shouldn't train. Just like I think that faculty, by and large, they get in a rut where they're so used to prescribing study plans and giving exams, and then they never take exams. Right, the last time I took an
Mm.
exam was when they finished their PhD dissertation 20 years ago. And so I really enjoy telling my students, like, no, I took a standardized test last spring because I still want to go through that process of being a beginner's mind, continuing to learn and grow. And I think if you're going to test people, write tests and questions for people, it's probably good to remind yourself of what it feels like to have that test anxiety and to want to do well and to wonder what's going to be on the test. Will you give us an example? What's the test going to be like?
Hmm.
Um,
I
it's
do
really
think in
easy to.
I do think in academia there tends to be a large disconnect from the practice what you preach, right?
I don't think that's just academia. I think that's everywhere because I think you made a good point, Don. Like a good coach is a continuous student of sorts.
Mhm. But you see, say you take a high school business class. When was the last time that person started a business, did a business, owned a business, got involved in business, right? You see that, right? Usually in the physical education environment, usually people get involved in physical education or exercise science out of their own. They they got their job at the gym,
Yeah, firsthand
right? They
experience.
got their
Yep.
firsthand experience. I tell people quite often. One year I had a guy come in and help us in the weight room in the summer, and he was an attorney by trade and took an hour and a half every morning to come in and work in the high school environment. And he was a competitive power lifter. I think he probably weighed probably 240, 250, squatted 800, right?
Mm,
And he spent
damn.
months and months and months and months and years and years and years and years perfecting a skill of squatting, hours and hours and hours under the bar. And I brought him in and he went over one whole session one morning on teaching our kids how to squat. He was an attorney by trade. And my reasoning was there's no better education than getting under the bar.
Hmm.
I'm sorry. Like guy doesn't have to take a squat class. He doesn't have to take an exercise science degree. I don't need him to be able to do a functional movement screen. I don't need to be able to do anything. I need him to show our kids how to get underneath a bar and squat.
Hmm.
And this guy was an expert to me because of the hours and hours and hours and hours and hours he was underneath the bar learning to squat. That was good enough for me. The education under the bar.
Mm.
And
Hmm.
he taught all of our
Continuous
kids how to
student.
squat. And our kids everybody learned how to squat. And it
Hmm.
was interesting. It was really neat to watch how he cued it. Not only, well, I'll say this. It wasn't the cues that got me watching him coach the squat. It was the small amount of cueing he gave.
Mhm.
Very little confusion. He wanted the kids to get really good at like three cues, and they got really good at three cues. And if one cue didn't work, he gave another cue, and he said, "Okay, now just keep repeating that and let their body feel it and let them move into it." And I liked I'm not a large cuer. I don't over I'm really cautious. I think the body kind of corrects itself in many ways in movement. I think the body's job is to do a task. The body will figure out how to do that task. Sometimes as coaches, it's our way to get out of the way of that. Get out of the way of that, right?
Mhm.
But Don, I'm going to put you on the spot. Would you consider yourself an expert?
It's a very broad question.
Okay. Yeah. Oh God, no. You see, you just see, Don. I thought I could.
He's gonna outsmart you
I
every
thought I was gonna
time.
get you, Don. I threw a jab and Don Hook ducked underneath it and hit me with a left hook. Okay, let me ask you this. Two-part to this. Is there in your field of profession? Now, you're the father of 4 boys. You're probably an expert. Maybe you're very qualified and well
Raising
educated
boys.
and raising boys, right? You're like,
Yeah.
you're like, wow. I mean, if somebody came to me, is like, man, I'm gonna talk to my boys. I've got to talk to Don, right? 4 boys.
Mhm.
In your professional life, is there a subject that you would be considered an expert on, or is there a subject that your peers would consider you an expert on?
Yeah. So I think it all depends on what you're comparing yourself to. I would say that I'm an expert physical therapist
Okay.
because I'm double board certified, which means that beyond my graduate degree and my license in physical therapy, I then pursued further training to be really affirmed, validated by my peers in both orthopedics and sports physical therapy, which is to be double board certified is roughly 1,000 PTs in the country are double board certified. That doesn't mean that there aren't brilliant PTs who are not, trained in that way or with those credentials. But that is just, I passed exams that were written by experts in my field, and these were tough exams. They were 200 questions at a testing center that, took about maybe, I don't know, 5-6 hours to do. But that was one of the tests I took last spring. So yeah, I would say that I'm an expert in orthopedic and sports physical therapy. And then within that, there's certainly, nuance and things that I'm better at than others. And I think this is part of expertise. Part of expertise is being able to talk very humbly and openly about what you're good at and what you're not. I call it sober self-awareness of who you are and who you're not. And so depending on the room I'm in or the team that I'm on, right now I work in D2 athletics. And so we have 9 athletic trainers. We have 3 strength coaches. We have two or three physicians involved. There's a lot of people involved in on our staff, and they all have lots of expertise, and our scopes of practice overlap a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And so should I be the one, that's programming for, an athlete or a team? Well, I could program. Is that, I have my CSCS, but is that what I'm really good at? Not really.
Yeah.
No. In fact,
Yeah.
our strength coaches are way better at that than
Mhm.
I am. And do I have some training in emergency management to like run out on the field or assess something acutely? I do. Am I as good at that as my athletic trainers are? No,
Mhm.
I'm not.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
again, if it depends, I think expertise has a lot to do. It's relative to like what the setting, the environment is that you're in.
Mhm.
If you put me, on a staff with, I don't know, an NBA organization, right? I probably am going to have to even niche down even more. In my current setting, what I like about what I'm doing is that I'm kind of a Swiss Army knife. Like if we lost a bunch of athletic trainers a few years ago onto other things, other jobs, and we kind of went down to about 50% of our staff, and so then my utilization went up,
Yeah. Yeah.
and my head athletic trainer was like, "Well, what can you do again? Who are you? What do you do?" And so, but before the end of that year, I think I had most of the post ops, which was great, and I enjoyed that. But I also this past summer went with our D2 track team to D2 nationals in Kansas. I got to fill in for our track and field athletic trainer who couldn't go, and I loved that experience. And
Mhm.
so handling hamstring strains, and then so it's very, at where I'm at, it's very broad, and I think my expertise has probably been less like narrow and funneling down and more kind of broad of like, what are the needs of my department and how do I fit in? What can I do to
Yeah.
help plug a hole somewhere? And so I enjoy that. I think I went to PT school because I saw it as rigorous and I saw it as very broad. I could do, a lot of things. And I was, I was interested in that breadth as well as the depth.
Do you feel this, and this might be case by case because it could be depending on the profession or the study, but do you feel like there's a certain criteria that makes you an expert?
Yeah. That's what I was my question, I was gonna kind of follow some of the things you guided us through, because
Yeah.
the stuff you gave us was really what you sent over was very beneficial, because it does help guide this conversation, because it can go a
Sure.
thousand different ways.
Mhm.
Yeah.
The
Yeah,
path,
I
the path
certainly.
and the process.
Mhm.
Yeah. I think there's some essential elements to expertise. I think it starts with some level of passion. Like when I think about the letters that I have behind my name, or anybody that I look at, online who's got letters behind their name, you know, I don't think about those letters as, oh, that's what makes them an expert. I think about them as these are things that this person's interested in, right? They're interested in strength and conditioning. I don't call myself a strength
Oh,
coach. I
yeah.
have never been paid really, especially if a salary full time, to be a strength and conditioning coach. I love the weight room. I've apprenticed under strength coaches. I've learned a lot from strength coaches, but I don't call myself a strength coach, even though I have my CSCS and I
Mhm.
took that the week I started PT school. So I've been a CSCS for a long time. I volunteer in the NSCA. Just got back from their national conference in New Orleans. But I don't call myself that because that's not really how I serve, in my current setting. So I think it's a combination of things. It's passion, it's experience. The experiences matter, both firsthand experience and secondhand. So do you train? Do you compete? Are you coaching? Are you prescribing? Are you treating? Whatever your scope of practice is. And then what is that ongoing learning looking like? Like, are you regularly reassessing your strengths and your weaknesses? Uh, I call it kind of like a metacognition. Like, are you reflecting on the successes and failures that are going on in your practice, and then trying to plug, right? Like, well, I really think I need to get better at cueing or programming, or need to get better at this manual technique, or I need to be better at when to refer out
Mm.
for a medical consult or a surgical consult. I don't really know when, someone with back pain needs to go see their physician. Well, like let's talk about that. So the other concept that comes in with expertise a lot, and this is another term that's I think way overutilized in our current cultural moment, is mentorship. So another essential element is mentorship. And I've noticed people online lately trying to monetize their mentorship, join my mentor group, my mastermind
Mhm.
group.
Mhm.
And I have nothing against, people being capitalistic and yeah, monetizing their expertise. And that's fine. I do question, I think that as soon as you're paying someone for their mentorship, I think it changes the dynamic. Meaning, if you are now a customer and they are charging you for their expertise or their mentorship, then are they going to tell you the hard stuff, what you really need to hear, when that might jeopardize your willingness to continue to pay them in perpetuity? I've been, blessed to be mentored by people who I didn't pay them specifically to mentor me. I'm not saying they didn't get some benefit, certainly indirectly, if I was employed by them, let's say, but I didn't pay them specifically for mentorship. I also delineate between apprenticeship and mentorship. I think this is very important. I have been in apprenticeships and I've been in mentorships, and I think this conversation is really, really fascinating. They're not the same thing, in my opinion. An apprenticeship is, and I think we all apprentice at some level in some way.
Mhm.
Most internships, in an undergrad or even in a grad school experience, is really an apprenticeship where, you go out and you spend time in a clinical setting or a weight room, wherever, and you're basically learning by doing. So you're watching the expert do something, and then you're going to replicate that. And so I certainly early in my career watched experts and then mimicked them. I think that's an apprenticeship. You don't have enough expertise to be able to like push and pull on the topic and the expert and like ask really good questions. You're just kind of trying to figure out how to do the job. Think back to those first programs you wrote, or those first rehabs that you were ever a part of, or the first evaluation you ever did as a clinician. A mentorship, though, is a more bilateral relationship where there's this like this push and pull, this interaction where, you know, you're watching someone do something or you're doing something together and you're trying to dig deeper, right? Ask better questions, be more efficient, be more effective. I think mentorship is a really special thing that's, I think, done best when it's altruistic, when it's
Mm,
really about like what
mhm.
is best for the end user or the clientele or the patient. It's about, I think good mentors are also, they tend to transcend the domains. Like you may start out in this relationship in a particular occupational context, but quickly that mentor becomes influential across your life, right? Like you start talking about things that
Yeah.
aren't related to your career, and
Mhm.
it's, you know, it's family advice or relationship advice or spiritual advice or any number of things. But, you know, how did you navigate this or how do you deal with that? And so I think it's really important and helpful to delineate between those two because
I like that.
I've
I
been in
like that.
relationships that I wanted to be a mentorship, but it was actually an apprenticeship.
Mhm.
Meaning I also think mentorship, when I say it's bilateral, I mean both parties need to want it. They have to both want to connect and interact at that level to be accessible to one another. Um, an apprenticeship, I think, is different. It's like, hey, come over here. I'm going to show you how to do this, and then I want you to do it just like I showed you.
Mhm. You know what it reminds me of? We've all. I'm going to make an assumption. We've all seen Good Will Hunting. Yes or no?
Mhm.
Okay.
Mhm.
The
Finally, a movie
relationship.
I've seen.
Finally, Don. I am frustrated with the movies this woman has not seen. Uh, the relationship between Will Hunting and Robin Williams, whoever he is.
Right. Sure.
Mhm.
That relationship
Yeah.
turned
I agree.
into well, he's my patient. Then it turned into like a mentorship,
Yeah.
friendship, to
I
where they're
agree.
both teaching each other multiple things, right? Which is the beauty of that I don't know if they meant to write it that way, but the way it played out on screen, you're like, oh my gosh, like
Yeah. It was
that's
beautiful.
one of the most beautiful friendships you'll ever see.
Yeah. And
And
the element I think early on in that movie is them feeling each other out and trying to
yeah.
find some level of vulnerability.
Oh, it
It-
was two kids that grew up in the same neighborhood trying to play each other out, dude. It was a street conversation. Yeah.
yeah. So there's no
Yeah.
way to be in a mentorship if both parties aren't willing to be vulnerable.
I recently had a kid. I have a kid that graduated our school, and he's intelligent kid, highly intelligent kid. He is in engineering at Georgia Tech, and is already doing like his internships, is already doing research. He already got published research after 2 years. Like incredibly, incredibly intelligent kid. To the point I told his mom, he asked about jujitsu his senior year in high school, and I think he needs jujitsu because if he doesn't, he's going to be that kid that's in the lab 24/7, academic, working on career, and he's going to grow a beard. And before you know it, his name's going to be Ted Kaczynski. He's going to be living in Montana. I said, I'm just telling you, I have concerns about your child not being like almost, you know, I remember senior year, he's walking through and he had Dostoevsky in his book, and I'm like, oh dude, this kid's headed down the path. Like I know this path, bro. I am fully aware of this path with a kid that's going to go to Georgia Tech, become an engineer, and is reading Dostoevsky. And I'm talking like, I think he had like all five, they call it the five major books of Dostoevsky, and I think he had at one point in the senior year, I saw all five. So somebody told him about all five. He had all five. He's talking to me about them. I'm like, buddy, you need jujitsu. You need to have this. And he started doing it, and now he's in love with it. And now he messaged me last week, and he goes, "Hey, coach, I'm ready to take this thing. I'm ready to go. I'm like, what do I need to do to master this thing?" I said, first off, that's not going to happen. I said, it's a journey that never ends. Okay, because he actually said, like, I want to master this. I said, first off, it won't happen. I go, you'll never. Once you think you're good at it, you're not even. A black belt is not even the beginning of mastery. I can't explain to somebody how I went back to wearing diapers at black belt. It's incredible. And, jujitsu has this culture where like they'll call you like professor, and like, dude, if you call me professor, I'll punch you in the face. Like if you elevate a black, first off, never elevate a black belt. They're just normal human beings, right? They didn't get injured, and they just been doing it longer than you. And he asked me, he goes, how do I go about doing this? I said, it needs to become 3 days a week. When you go, you need to just clock in days and go. 2, you need to latch on to people at that place that you respect, that are doing it right, that keep going every day, that you watch how they go about the art, and you will need to latch onto them and be at their hip 24/7. And then when you talk about mentorship, that's what I was really trying to tell the kid. You need to go find a mentor. It doesn't have to be your professor. Actually, I'd prefer it not to be, because we elevate these people a little bit too much, right? There's this worship of your professor. Find people that are in the school, purple belts, brown belts, and find a mentor in jujitsu that you can latch onto, that you can ask questions to, that you can mimic how they go about their warm-ups, their cool downs, how they compete, everything. And that's what you need to be. And then you need to make the decision right now that you're not going to quit.
Mm-hmm.
That's how you get good. You get good. And I think about, as I look through the list of things you send us, what makes an expert? And I don't know, was it Albert Einstein that said you should be able to explain it to somebody like they're 5?
Simple.
Right?
Simple, but no
Yeah.
simpler.
You should be able to explain. And I heard Joe Rogan say this. You can tell an expert because you could wake them up in the dead middle of sleep and ask them a question, and they'll go, oh, like you could ask. Joe Rogan used this as an example. He goes, you could get me up at 3:00 in the morning, ask me a specific position in jujitsu, and ask him how you would go about either getting out of it or submitting for somebody from that position. And he'd wipe his eyes and be like, all right, well, you got to look at these grips, and this is what you got to defend, and this is where your hand needs to be. And then if they go here, you go here. This is your counter to the finish. And then you go back to bed. Right? That to me is an expert. Right? They know the ins and outs of the subject so well they can explain it to you like you're a 5-year-old. Right? And get really good at it. Anytime someone's like, oh man, that's just so complex, I don't know if I can explain it to you. I'm like, try me.
Right.
Try me.
On the spot.
So on the spot. So I guess when we go back to that actual subject, how do you define expert? I know that's hard to define. Because I just kind of described a characteristic. They can make it simple. What are characteristics of somebody that's an expert? And we can keep it in strength and conditioning if you want to, for people to have an example maybe. But what are the characteristics? How can you identify in 5 minutes of conversation with somebody at a national conference that they're an expert physical therapist?
Oh, yeah. Wow, that's just salient because you just came back from a conference.
Yes.
and interacted with so many people, with various backgrounds. And I agree, right? That's probably what we're all doing at that conference, or anytime you meet new professionals and colleagues, you're trying to kind of feel them out. I think the thing that I look for probably the most, to answer the kind of the last question first, is humility. I think
That's just in my head.
true experts are very humble. Although I'm not a martial artist, I've heard it kind of talked about, like, it's not the person who is boasting about their years of experience or their belt or whatever. It's kind of the quiet, or the person who's not trying to get into altercations that you probably need to be more concerned about. Yeah, the expert is someone that is also very quick to divulge their conflicts of interest, their limitations, where, like, what do I feel really comfortable talking about, and what am I an expert in, and what am I not? In other words, I also look for the answers I don't know, or I was wrong about that. I used to think this way and now I don't anymore. And then probably the final one would be an I'm sorry. Like, I advocated for this maybe online, or I wrote a paper or whatever, and then to come out and have to, retract or redact some part of it, or to admit like, oh, I thought this at one point. Those are my favorite articles. The articles that I will read are, kind of the this old sage wisdom. I've been a strength coach for 30 years, and here's the mistakes, the biggest mistakes I've made across my career. Those are the conversations that I'm looking for. So I
That's awesome.
define expertise as proficiency, not just competency. I think that's important. Competency and proficiency are not the same thing. Competency is what you get when you like come out of school and you passed your certification or you pass your licensure exam. That means that you're safe and competent. So I define expertise as proficiency in skill, knowledge, and or understanding in a very specific field acquired through practice. I don't think expertise necessarily guarantees success or greatness or leadership. But I think we know expertise when we see it, and we see it even if you're not an expert or you're not familiar with it. We see it in the sense we use words, adjectives like fluid, or they're in the flow, or there's an effortlessness to what they're doing. So
Yeah.
much so that the spectator or the audience member is awed by this person's ability. And we tend to confuse that with like talent. We're like, oh, this person's so talented on the court, on the platform, in the lab, whatever they're doing on the mat. But I think talent is a thing, potential is a thing, and it matters because there's plenty of things that I'm not gifted at, I'm not talented at. Give me any type of art like task, and you will see how untalented I am at drawing and coloring and playing a musical instrument. So those are not my gifts. But we recognize it when we see it, right? There is, a beauty to what they're doing and an effortlessness to it that I think is just attractive. It's appealing, and they've worked hard to get there. If you want to get good at something, I don't care what it is. It doesn't matter what it is. To go from novice to some level of expertise, which I do think is an ongoing line of continuum, I think it requires lots of hard work. And when I heard that as an early career professional, I heard lots of hard work. What I didn't hear enough about was being patient. I needed to be patient with the process. I needed to be more patient with myself. I wanted to be someplace or do something or have some skill, and I wanted it now. And that delayed gratification of embracing the journey and the process. You can set a goal, short term, long term, whatever you want to call it, but then you have to embrace the process to get there. And that requires, stacking days and being consistent and being disciplined. So I think early career professionals, and I don't just mean young people. I mean like you're new into this career or this hobby or recreation. So this isn't just necessarily chronology. When you're early on in something, I think they need to hear that. They need to be reminded, hey, like expertise, learning takes time. Getting fit or getting strong, it takes time, right? And we give you a stimulus, we teach you a lesson, you go to the weight room, you do a thing, and then what do you need? You need to rest. It's why the semester system is 15 to 16 weeks, right? And we give you little chunks of information, 50 minutes of class or 75 minutes of class, and then I don't see you for a day or two. Like that's how we learn things. Your brain needs time to rest, and it needs time to process. The job of a professor or a teacher, right, is yes, it's to disseminate, to give some sort of transaction of information, but it's also to inspire and to engage, right? There's a level of just like enthusiasm, right? The people that it's easy to learn from are people that are excited, right? And so aligning your excitement, your passion, right, with kind of the right environment and the right position to share that enthusiasm. So like I told my wife I was going to do this, and I usually tell her like 'cause I'm not, I'm not a big podcast person, but she goes, "Oh, you mean someone reached out to you and they want to hear what you think about a particular subject?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And she goes, "Of course you're going to do that, right?" Right.
Yeah.
After I just got done being at a conference, I've actually been gone to quite a few conferences this summer, and it's been great. And so people will ask me like, "Well, how was the conference?" And I'm like, I'm probably not a really good person to ask because I'm going to have a good time no matter what. Like,
Have you been
Mhm.
able to speak at a conference, at a national conference? You've spoken at not too long?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. It's been a while.
Mhm.
Probably a decade. I
Mhm.
see SCCA. I've spoken there and
Okay.
I've spoken
Okay.
at NSCA, but and some APTA stuff. But it's been a while. I took a break when my boys were little
Mhm.
and I
Mhm.
couldn't travel, but I'm starting to lean back into that. I'm the volunteering as the Tennessee state director for the NSCA.
Okay.
So I think I am going to submit a proposal for next year as the 50th
To speak.
anniversary for the
Well, is
NSCA.
it really?
But yeah, I think,
Mhm.
people ask me like, okay, well, like my wife might ask me later on tonight, how'd the interview go? And I'll be like, I had a great time.
Yeah.
Like I'm gonna have a great time whether, you guys do or not, or whether like anyone listens or not. Like like that,
No,
it
I
doesn't
always have a
really.
good time done. I feel like I need to read 10 books by the time
Well,
I'm
Don,
done
I'll tell
talking to
you,
you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
you have a very, and this is again just to honor you, Don, because I know you're very humble. We talked. It's funny you said about humility. The first thing, because the
Mhm.
first thing I said when I asked you that question was, I thought, well, what are the people in jujitsu who are the experts? What do you see the most in them? And I literally 5 seconds before you said humility in my head, I said they're extremely humble. They're extremely humble to the point where you're just almost like a little bit scared, like, does he know something I don't know? Because that dude's
Yeah.
so like the dude that gets on the mat when it's open mat and the dude sits down and you're like, that dude is so chilled out that like his heart rate's like 40 and there's 20 dudes on this mat that might try to kill him, and my man is so chill. I'm like, that dude's so dangerous.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
that dude is, and he's gonna put
Yeah.
you to sleep like slipping you into a warm bath.
Watch Lionel Messi play soccer. I haven't
Oh
watched
Wow.
my,
like,
talk about an
right.
expert.
Oh my goodness. Like
Almost genius level, right?
he is genius, right? And when you watch him play at the beginning of the match, it's like bro is walking around. I'm no soccer expert, by the way, but
Yeah,
like
me
for
neither.
just enjoying the game, enjoying the
Yeah.
match, and like seemed like he's so chill. But no, he's analyzing right where everybody is and their proclivities and what they like to do, and then he is finding his way to be at the ideal position for the pass and the first touch and the goal. Like so, yeah, I think expertise is so fascinating because we know it exists. It is very hard to measure. It's very hard to quantify. But we know it when we see it, and it's infatuating, right?
Mhm.
It's so good.
I'll tell you
I
this.
think it's
Yeah.
also a function of exposure. Like
Mhm.
you might be the
Yes.
strongest person in your gym, well, then you probably need to go to a different gym, right? If you might be a smart person in your whatever school or whatever you're doing, you probably need to also, right, go to that state level or go to the national level or the international level because that's where you're going to find the greatest growth, right? It's when there's other people who are excited about what you're excited about, and then they're like, well, hey, have you thought about it like this? And
Mhm.
have you been challenged to
Mhm.
dig deeper?
I
We
like
have a
that point that you said earlier when you were talking about somebody who's in like their own private practice. Well, are
yeah.
you being challenged outside? And I had never really
Wow,
thought
it's
about it
tough.
that
Yeah.
way, but
The
that is
echo
such an
chamber, right,
interesting,
Gray? The echo
yeah, it's
chamber you're in.
such an interesting point for expertise because I think, I mean, no matter the subject, I can't think of really a single subject unless it's maybe history, but I still feel like that can change over time. Most subjects are changing over time. We're learning more and more and more and more and more. So it's really, if you don't have other people to talk to all the time to become an expert, because if everything's changing and you just believe one way,
Sure. And
it's
we all need
really
that,
not reaching that.
and we all need that encouragement. I think
Mhm.
we need that, that time for someone who knows, what you're going through or what you're trying to become good at. And we need to hear it from them. We need to hear them
Yeah.
say, "Oh, yeah, I got stuck there too," and here's how I navigated that. Here's how I did that. And so I think a lot of folks confuse some online education
Mhm.
or connection or social media or again mentorship group. They confuse and conflate that with, I think, what I'm talking about is more intimate. It's more
Mhm.
Yeah.
vulnerable. It's
Yeah.
more,
I was
like
gonna use the word more emotional.
yeah, I've thought about like, can you really be mentored from a distance? And I think probably you can, but I think it works best, at least in my career, when it's been in person. And I've relocated, right? I've moved across the country, but for that type of mentorship. And
Yeah, yeah.
I've moved my family multiple times to be in the clinic, with some thought leader in my field because I wanted to see them do the thing that they do and to learn directly from them. It's no different than a continuing education business, and someone comes up with an idea and like you want to hear it from them, right? But if you hear it from the 3 or 4 layers down, right, it's not the same experience, right? You're not hearing it from kind of the guru, right? And so
Mhm.
I think that there's a lot that goes into this, and not everyone's journey is going to be my journey, and I think that's okay too. But there is some structure to this. I think it's a framework, and I think again, you're early on in a particular discipline, and I think it helped me to have some structure. I started
Mhm.
studying expertise, I think, because I needed some structure to it. Back to the where we started, Gray, right? With having
Mhm.
some structure and organization. I needed some of that framework for myself to just kind of appreciate where I'm at in my journey and where I was going. And how do you get it's really a very, very basic question. How do you get good at something?
Yeah.
How do
Mhm.
you get good at it?
We have
How do
this
you get good?
kid. We have this kid at our school, and I've only spent about 6 weeks with him, rising freshman. And after about a week, someone's like, "What do you think about that kid?" I said, "That's a Division I athlete." Like, I could tell in the first 20 minutes, 30 minutes.
Mhm.
And everybody's like, "What do you mean? Like, he's only rising freshman?" No, I've just seen it so many times. And I've seen it progress so many times, and I've seen the process, and I've had a couple conversations with him. I knew a little bit about him. I saw him move, run, jump, lift. I saw the intention he put into his work ethic. I saw the work ethic he had. I saw the skill set. I saw him jump. We got tendo numbers off him real quick. We
Yep.
got early tendo numbers off him because I was like, all right, I need something empirical here. I saw his tendo numbers, and I'm like, this is stupid. I go, this is a stupid number. Like, this is they're like, how do you know it's a Division I athlete? I said, I've seen it 1,000 times. I know what it looks like. It's no different than seeing somebody at jiu-jitsu get 6 months into jiu-jitsu. And I look at the next person next to me. I said, in 2 years, that dude's putting everybody here to sleep. Like, how
Mhm.
do you know? Because I've seen it.
Yeah.
I've seen it. I know the attributes that it takes. And I've had the conversations with him. I see the body. I see the skill set. I see the empirical numbers. I see the work ethic. And I go, no, that's a Division I athlete. He's going to be a freak show. And they're like, well, he's only 14. I said, okay, I'm telling you, when the kid's 17 years old, you can leave and come back, and this is who the kid's going to be. Well, how do you know that? I'm like, well, I wish I could tell you, but whatever that factor is,
Right.
he's got that it thing that
Yeah.
most people don't have.
Yeah.
And he barely knows how to tie his shoes. Like, the kid's wet behind the ears.
So you're exercising pattern recognition as well as I would call it also intuition. Daniel Kahneman put some high value on intuition,
Mhm.
but it's based on your experiences.
Mhm.
And when you like you said, when you've seen a couple thousand, of these cases, right? You
Mhm.
start to have some pattern recognition, like, oh, I've seen that first step before. I've seen, right, someone jump like that or sprint like that or lift like that.
Yeah.
And I think that
Yeah.
that makes sense. I think that tracks.
Yeah. Well, Don, I would like to do a part two. And Gray's got a call in 6 minutes. Gray,
10
unfortunately,
more
is leaving for Africa. She's going to Africa, and she'll be coming back. And I would like to do a part two. When do you start back school?
Late August.
Okay, we got plenty.
We got plenty of
Let's get.
time. Yeah.
All right, Don. We appreciate you coming on, my friend.
All
Thank
right.
you so
Thank you.
Hey,
much.
guys.